Hurricane Maria reached Category 5 strength on September 18th, just before making landfall on Dominica, becoming the first Category 5 hurricane on record to strike the island. Hi, I'm Chris May, writer, producer, and host of This Day in Weather History, now in its second year from the Weather Network in Canada. Originating from a tropical wave, Maria was named on September 16th when it became a tropical storm just east of the Lesser Antilles. It happened this day in weather history. Only weeks after Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Harvey devastated cities around the Gulf of Mexico, Hurricane Maria hit numerous islands in the Caribbean. On September 18, 2017, Maria reached sustained winds of 280 kilometers per hour. That equates to about 175 miles per hour, and that devastated Dominica, St. Croix, and Puerto Rico. It is regarded as the worst natural disaster in recorded history to affect those islands, and was also the deadliest hurricane since Jeanne in 2004. Maria was the 10th most intense Atlantic hurricane on record and the most intense tropical cyclone worldwide that year. Staying in 2017 specifically, Maria was also the 13th named storm, 8th consecutive hurricane, 4th major hurricane, 2nd Category 5, and deadliest storm of the above-average 2017 Atlantic hurricane season. It was a nasty one that year. Welcome to year 2 of this podcast. Right now, you're listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider. But there's also the daily podcast video short. They're shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective. And oftentimes, they will include visuals from that day's event from when it happened in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. At its peak, the hurricane caused catastrophic destruction, causing numerous fatalities and further complicating the recovery efforts in the areas of the Leeward Islands that had already been damaged critically by Hurricane Irma. But this Hurricane Maria in 2017 was very much a Puerto Rico story. It was the strongest hurricane to hit Puerto Rico in more than 80 years. It wiped out homes, roads, and bridges, while also knocking out power across the entire island. And it took a while to get the lights turned back on. 1 month after the hurricane, 88% of the island was still without power. That is simply inexcusable. But the excuses continued to pour in like the rain that came down. Infrastructure was crippled. Almost a third of the island lacked tap water, and 40% of the island had no cell service. Now here you may be thinking, oh no, they didn't have their cell phones. Listen, understand this. There are a lot of countries around this world who only have cell phones and no landline. You take away this service and you're effectively invisible. This was a total disaster. And unique to Puerto Rico, the country is what is referred to as an incorporated territory of the United States. This means that this gorgeous island with beautiful beaches and people is neither a sovereign nation nor a U.S. state, and they were treated as such in the aftermath by all accounts. Puerto Rico also suffered catastrophic damage and suffered a major humanitarian crisis. Most of the island's population suffered major flooding and a lack of resources that was made worse by the slow relief process. Again, inexcusable. Here's some perspective. Maria was responsible for killing upwards of 3,000 people that year. 97% of those were in Puerto Rico alone. 97%. Embedded in the prevailing westerlies, Maria eventually moved off to the east, then east-northeast, out and over the open Atlantic, becoming extratropical on September the 30th and mercifully dissipating by October 2nd. It was over. When tallies were finally completed and published, damages were estimated at $91 billion US, making it the third costliest tropical cyclone on record. And then, in 2018, the World Meteorological Organization retired the name Maria from its rotating lists of hurricane names due to the highly extensive amount of damage and loss of life it caused along its path. Maria, was the deadliest hurricane in Dominica since the 1834 Padre Ruiz hurricane and the deadliest in Puerto Rico since the 1899 San Ciriaco hurricane. And it reached its mammoth Cat 5 strength on September 18th of 2017, this day in weather history. Tomorrow is September 19th. What would come to be known as Hurricane Gabrielle developed in the Gulf of Mexico on the same day as the September 11 attacks. Flights had already been grounded for 2 days after that day, and things were nowhere near back to normal, nor would they be for a real long time. So I dare say, this is the worst time to throw in a hurricane, but the weather pauses for nothing and no one. With flights diverted to Gander, Newfoundland, Hurricane Gabrielle hit Newfoundland hard. We're going back there tomorrow on this day in weather history with me, your host, Chris May.